I sat motionless, as if frozen, while my wife, with whom I had lived for 25 years, explained why she had handed me the divorce papers. I could only understand half of what she was saying. My life is ruined. Gary, are you listening? You seem completely out of it. Please focus. This is important. I'm sorry, I zoned out for a moment. What were you saying? The terms are clear. There's nothing to dispute. I'm not asking for anything. Do you understand? Absolutely nothing. You keep the house, the cars, and all the money in the bank. If you sign, it will all be finalized in 3 months. I didn't know how to respond. Marcy and I had been together since high school and had raised 2 beautiful twin daughters. Cindy and Sandy were both studying international banking at Columbia. We lived in a nice house in the suburbs and each drove Volvos. Marcy had her own credit cards and a cell phone. I never denied her anything. I had never cheated or verbally or physically abused her. She had never hinted at being unhappy or voiced any complaints. I was completely unprepared for this moment. I hadn't noticed anything was wrong. Perhaps that was the issue. I hadn't been paying enough attention. I get how the divorce works, Marcy, but can you explain why? I suppose it's too late for me to change anything, but I'd really like to understand. Marcy sank slightly into the kitchen chair, clearly unwilling to talk about her reasons and hoping I would simply sign the papers so she could move on. Just give me the brief version, Marcy. What did I do wrong? You didn't do anything wrong, Gary. You were an excellent husband. There were times I wished you would mess up so I could justify leaving, but you never did. You did a fantastic job raising the kids and helping them get into college. You always provided me with everything I wanted, even when I was being unreasonable. You bought me a beautiful home, and my parents adore you. Don't ever think you did something wrong because you didn't. She looked great for 45, with a lovely complexion and perfect hair. Her light brown hair had highlights that shimmered in the sunlight. She jogged regularly, keeping her body toned and tanned. During the week, she dressed in a Land's End style, but she could be glamorous when the occasion called for it. Marcy was just as perfect as she claimed I was. I simply couldn't comprehend her reasoning. I'm sorry, but it doesn't add up. There has to be a reason. You can't say everything is fine, and then leave. There must be something. Gary, I'm trying to do this without hurting your feelings or making myself look bad. Can we just leave it at that? No. Gary, I found someone else. He's a developer with a nice condo overlooking the river and a sleek black Mercedes. He's attractive, wealthy, and completely in love with me. You've always been a produce clerk at a supermarket. I'm not belittling your job. You've always supported us and provided a comfortable life. However, you will always be a produce clerk. I wanted more than that. I couldn't envision you striving for anything beyond what you were content with. That stung. I was the manager of the produce department, yet she still saw me as just a clerk. I had passed up opportunities to advance and relocate to keep our family together, and this is how I was being rewarded. It hurt, but I decided it wasn't worth mentioning. Does this wealthy, handsome guy have a name? Clayton Manning. He's the president of Keystone Development Company. How long have you known him? 6 months. Have you been intimate with him? Marcy sat up straight in her chair, her eyes scanning the room before locking onto mine. Yes. I was trying to avoid the topic, but since you brought it up, yes. You were still married. Yes, I was still married. I cheated on you. I was unfaithful. I was a girl of easy virtue drug. Are you satisfied now? I paused for a moment, then reached for the divorce papers, signing in 3 places, initialing 2 and sliding them back across the table to her. I suppose he's a better man than I am. Sorry to disappoint you." As I stood to leave, Marcy shouted, "No, damn it! That's not it. He's not better than you, just different. Don't you dare walk away believing that, Gary. Don't you dare." By that point, I was already out the door. I had been so absorbed in my work and hobbies that I hadn't even realized Marcy had been gradually moving her things out of the house. By the time she handed me the papers, she had already taken most of her clothes and personal belongings to Clayton's condo. She had kindly left all the wedding and family photos for me to look at in her absence. When I got back home, she was already gone. Her Volvo remained in the driveway, leading me to believe she wouldn't be needing it anymore. On the kitchen table, I found a power of attorney for selling the house and her car. I spent the rest of the evening getting rid of the beer in the refrigerator. By this point, I figured it was a done deal. There was no turning back, nor did I want to. Marcy was gone, and she would remain that way. The next morning, I called in to work and took 3 months of overdue vacation. They had always been on my case about taking time off, so I had no issues doing so. I had accrued plenty of vacation and sick leave. I made a quick call to the girls at school to briefly explain that we were splitting up, but I refused to share any further details. They wanted to reach out to Marcy, but I didn't have her new number. I now had 3 months to get myself sorted and figure out my next steps. I disconnected the landline phone, changed my cell phone number, and canceled the one Marcy used. The Volvo dealer offered me the low book value for her car. I had a high school friend, Terry Davis, who was now a real estate broker, and he agreed to sell the house without a listing for a low price and quick settlement. To be safe, I canceled all my credit cards and opened new bank accounts. I also cashed in my life insurance policies. It was time for a fresh start. I went through the entire house, collecting anything that might have belonged to my wife. There was enough to fill 3 trash bags. I packed the girls' personal items in boxes and took them to a nearby storage unit. I spent 3 hours sorting through family photos, keeping all the pictures of the girls in one box for them, while tossing any photos with Marcy into the trash. It was immature, I know, but I didn't care. My main issue was a lack of direction. I had no clue what I would do once the 3 months were over. Would I stay or relocate? Would I keep working or look for something new? I had 2 hobbies: coin collecting, particularly Indian head cents, which were easy to find and collect. I bought and sold them on eBay, which I found enjoyable. My other passion was geocaching, as it provided me with a reason to get outside and exercise. However, Marcy despised it because of the ticks, poison ivy, and the walking involved. I didn't see how I could turn either of these hobbies into a career. When I wasn't engaged in my hobbies, I spent my time reading the Wall Street Journal. Cindy and Sandy gifted me a subscription every Christmas. Although I had no interest in stocks or bonds, I read everything related to farm commodities. I was more knowledgeable about sugar, wheat, and corn than many market analysts, but it was just a pastime for me, as I had no money invested in any of it. I looked into everything I could find about Keystone Development and Clayton Manning. Terry Davis was able to gather more information about Clayton and his current project than I could. He was cross-referencing some of the details with a friend at one of the local commercial banks. I was eager to see what he discovered. 7 weeks had gone by without any sight or word from Marcy. The girls called weekly but hadn't heard from their mother either. I sensed they were somewhat on my side, but since Marcy was their mother, I knew they would feel obligated to support her to some degree. I held several yard sales and managed to get rid of a lot of things, keeping just enough furniture in the house to make it presentable for potential buyers. Marcy and Clayton's photo appeared in the society section of the Sunday newspaper, showing them at a political rally, enjoying wine with influential locals. Weeks continued to pass. Terry presented me with an offer on the house. It was considerably lower than the appraisal, but they wanted to close in 60 days, which would be ideal. He had some intriguing information about Clayton and suggested we discuss it over lunch. I decided it was time to get out of the house for a bit. I needed a break. Hayes Mountain was one of the best spots for hiking and geocaching in the area. Unfortunately, I had already discovered all the hidden caches there. However, there were 3 benchmarks on the mountain. Benchmarks are survey reference points established across the country by the government, used by surveyors and land developers to delineate property lines. They typically come in the form of metal rods set in concrete. Finding benchmarks is an intriguing side quest for dedicated geocachers. I plan to locate all 3 benchmarks on the mountain today. In addition to my GPS, I would need to bring my metal detector, as locating rebar in the woods can be quite challenging. The GPS would guide me to the general area. Most of Hayes Mountain was managed by the Madison Land Trust, encompassing nearly 2,000 acres, but they were constantly looking to expand. With subdivisions and industrial parks consuming most of the available land, the trust relied on donations to survive. Next to the trust's parking area was an orchard and farmhouse marked with a large "For Sale" sign. After parking my car, I found myself wandering over to the orchard's fence to take a look. It seemed such a pity to think that soon this beautiful property might be leveled for the sake of development. Are you planning to buy it or just window shopping? I couldn't help but smile at the elderly man approaching me. He was dressed in coveralls and sported a John Deere baseball cap instead of a straw hat. He introduced himself as John Smurd. Well, if I had $1 million, I'd gladly take it off your hands. We both chuckled at that. You're not having any trouble selling this, are you? I've got some interested buyers, but I'm trying to hold out for as long as possible. Why's that? I was hoping the land trust would purchase it, but they seem unable to gather the funds. They want to let the fruit trees go wild, which suits me just fine. It's better than the developers who want to bulldoze it. I think it would nicely complement what's already there. How can the land trust compete with the big players? I offered them a better deal. The listing price is $1 million, but I'd sell it to the trust for $600,000. The problem is they can't seem to raise that amount right now. If they can't do it in 90 days, I'll have to go with the damn developer's option. That guy calls me every week and I'm getting fed up with it. An option isn't the same as a sale, is it? No, it's not. The buyer purchases a promise from me to sell him the land within the next 6 months for $1 million. He pays $100,000 for the option. If he can't secure the $1 million, he loses the option payment. It's a good deal for me, I suppose, but I really don't want him to have it. He has the $1 million secured, so he's in a good position. The issue is that he needs all 6 properties to make the deal work, which is why he's willing to pay more than it's worth. What happens if you don't sell him the option? He'll be in big trouble, completely lost. Since the land trust can't raise the funds, it looks like Keystone has a guaranteed deal. However, if he doesn't acquire this property, he'll lose the entire deal, including the money he put down for the options on the other 5 parcels, which is probably close to $1 million. His investors will bail and leave him stranded. If I had the cash, I'd help you out. Yeah, that's what everyone says. We both laughed again, and I set off on my hike. I found his mention of Keystone quite intriguing. The benchmarks were a mile apart in a straight line, but on the mountain it was twice that distance. The first 2 markers were relatively easy to find and were typical surveyor markers. The last one, however, was much older and significantly harder to locate. When I finally pinpointed it, I discovered a small brick monument with a bronze plate attached. It was hidden under years of leaves and debris. I took a picture of it to include in my log. That was when everything changed for me. The metal detector was still active, and as I walked away from the marker, it began to beep. The signal was faint, but it was definitely there. I put on the headset and started scanning an area about 10 feet south of the benchmark. Eventually, I zeroed in on the source and began to probe carefully. It's not common to find metal in the woods. 5 minutes later, I unearthed a small iron box wrapped in a heavily oiled canvas. It had a lot of surface rust, but the box itself remained intact. The lock, made of heavy bronze, was still functional. Typically, discoveries like this on public land are considered treasure and must be reported to the government or a historical agency. For some reason, that didn't seem like the right choice for me today. I tucked the box into my pack and headed home. As I drove home, my thoughts kept drifting to what was inside my small box. The first thing that popped into my mind was gold coins. Perhaps it contained significant documents from the Civil War, or even earlier times. The possibilities were only constrained by the box's size. Once home, I cleared off the kitchen table, grabbed a Foster's, and examined my discovery. I was reluctant to break the lock, but I couldn't figure out another way to open it. I wasn't sure if the lock's mechanism was still working, so I decided to sacrifice the lock instead. My bolt cutter made quick work of it. Inside the box, I found another piece of the oiled canvas. As I carefully unwrapped it, I discovered 12 pennies. Why would anyone go through the effort to bury just 12 pennies? These weren't ordinary coins. They were old large cents, with the latest date being from 1814 and the oldest from 1793. Despite their age, the dates were clearly legible on each one. Remarkably, they showed no green corrosion, which is typical for old copper coins. I had never collected large cents, as I preferred to invest in newer Indian head cents. However, I had a book left to me by my grandfather called Penny Whimsy, which detailed the different types and die varieties of large cents. I found it boring since I didn't own any, and it had been gathering dust on my shelf for nearly 30 years. Tonight I would finally put it to good use. I stayed up until dawn with my grandfather's book and a magnifying glass, scanning high-definition images of each coin. Every die crack and scratch was perfectly captured, revealing the condition of each coin clearly. I ended up sleeping until noon and called work just to check in. They informed me that Phil Williams, one of the company executives, had been asking about me, but they didn't have any further details. With so much on my mind, I chose not to dig deeper. I realized I needed to visit the bank to secure a safety deposit box. After several hours online, I discovered that my pennies were worth several $million, not just because of their age, but due to their condition and die variety. I finally understood why prohibited substances dealers go to such lengths to launder money. Converting my valuable coins into cash wouldn't be straightforward. More effort was necessary. While having breakfast at IHOP, I saw another photo in the newspaper of Marcy and Clayton at the opening of a new art gallery. She looked stunning in a black cocktail dress, holding a glass of wine or champagne, and they were both beaming for the camera. As I studied the picture, my next step became increasingly clear. After securing the safety deposit box, I contacted John Smurd and requested that he postpone any decisions regarding the land for a few days. He seemed pleased with my call. I then drove to the Land Trust office to inquire about how to make a donation to the organization, and they were more than happy to assist me. It would take 4 weeks for the divorce to be finalized, and for some reason I felt that this timeline was significant. I spent the remainder of the day researching coin dealers and auction houses, not for advertisements, but for potential litigations. Eventually, I focused on Towers and Burns in New York City, which had a strong financial standing and appeared capable of managing controversial sales with minimal issues and low visibility. I scheduled an appointment with them for Monday afternoon and called the girls to ask them to keep Monday morning free for lunch together. The front of the Towers and Burns office was a flashy showroom filled with glass and lights. Display cases showcased a typical range of collectibles, while the walls were adorned with various numismatic supplies. After identifying myself, I was escorted to a less ostentatious area of the building. "Welcome to New York, Mr. Simmons. I understand you have some interesting coppers to present. Is this your first visit to the city?" I settled into a straight-back chair across from James Towers, who looked about 10 years older than in his advertisements. "Thank you. My daughters are both attending Columbia, so I've been here before, but not for business. While I don't doubt your expertise in coins, do you have anyone on your team who specializes in early copper coins? Their presence would be beneficial." I'm not too sensitive, and I agree that it would be a good idea. He leaned over to the intercom on his desk. "Marie, could you please ask Cookson to come into my office?" Maurice Cookson had authored several reference books on large cents and half cents, and I was pleased he was available, though he also appeared older than in his photos. Apparently, no one enjoys looking older. "Gentlemen, I have 12 special coins I'm offering for sale today. I hope to sell 4 of them and leave a 5th for your consideration. The remaining 7 are reserved for later. If everything goes well today, I would like to offer those to you as well. It may sound unbelievable, but I believe 6 of the coins might qualify for condition census status. I trust Mr. Cookson will assess that for us. Since condition census cents are rarely available, I was hoping you would be interested. Where did these coins come from?" "They were left to me by my grandfather when he passed away." "I don't mean to be rude, Mr. Simmons, but that story is hard to believe. What do you have to show us?" I slid 4 photographs across the desk, each displaying the front and back of one of the coins I was presenting today. They were about 5 times the usual size and exceptionally clear. James and Maurice spent several minutes examining each image. Finally, James asked, "What do you have in mind for these 4? Based on a quick review of the latest auction results, I estimate that around 1,300,000 would be a reasonable figure. I was thinking about 1.1 million, but your estimate isn't entirely off." Maurice clearly knew his pennies well. "I'm looking for 800,000 for the entire lot, but it needs to be done in a specific manner." James leaned back in his chair, smiling. "I think we can manage that. What kind of special arrangements are you considering?" I handed Mr. Towers a form letter I had obtained from the Land Trust, which outlined the process for donating land, along with the real estate listing for John Smurd's orchard. "I want you to purchase this piece of land and donate it to the Madison Land Trust. The asking price is $600,000. You'll receive a nice tax deduction and be recognized as humanitarians. The remaining funds I would like in cash. Please give us a moment." James and Maurice moved to the other side of the room. After a few minutes, Maurice exited, and James returned to the table. "Do you have the coins with you?" "Yes, I do. I also have a 5th coin that I'd like to leave with you." Mr. Cookson reappeared at the table with a purple Crown Royal bag. This time he initiated the conversation. "We are prepared to accept your terms for the first part of the deal and hope you can agree to ours for the second part." He then emptied the purple bag onto the desk, revealing nearly 100 assorted coins, mostly gold, but some silver. The retail value of this collection is nearly $300,000. For various reasons that we won't get into, it's challenging for us to sell these. However, you shouldn't have any issues. I understand you've sold coins on eBay before. Is that correct? I nodded in agreement. These coins, which you also inherited from your grandfather, should sell quite easily, allowing us both to benefit. I assure you there won't be any difficulties," he added, with a slight wink. I took a moment to think it over, and then agreed to the deal. I handed over 4 pennies to Mr. Towers, and we all shook hands. "Now, Mr. Simmons, tell us about the 5th coin." I held up a photo and glanced at Mr. Cookson. "What's the highest grade you've ever seen for a 1793 strawberry?" "I've never actually seen one, but I believe the highest grade is a fair 12. I rated this one as a good 8, but I'm not a professional." He wasn't looking at the picture. He was focused on my expression as I said that. Both of them were trying to get a glimpse of the photo at the same time. Cookson had a broad smile, and I could see dollar signs in Towers' eyes. "How much?" "Best offer, if you can figure out how to pay me." "Would you like a cup of coffee, Mr. Simmons?" "Sure, black is fine." They both exited the room with the picture, and a few minutes later a young woman brought me a cup of coffee. "Mr. Towers will return shortly. He had to make some phone calls. Will you be okay?" I nodded and began to enjoy my coffee. 30 minutes later, Towers returned with a stunning woman. She had dark eyes, raven hair, and appeared to be of Middle Eastern descent. I guessed she was no older than 30. She was well-dressed and carried herself with confidence. For a moment, I thought I recognized her but couldn't recall from where. "Hello, my name is Letitia Rothberg. Do you have a passport, Mr. Simmons?" Her voice was deep yet feminine. "Yes." "Great. We're heading to Kennedy soon to set up your new offshore bank account. Do you have something for Mr. Towers?" I handed the 1793 strawberry to James, and he looked like a kid on Christmas morning. Thank you," he exclaimed as he left the room. We hadn't settled on a price, but I still had 7 coins that Towers was interested in. Mr. Towers agreed to keep the small bag of coins until I returned. An hour later, Letitia and I were on a flight to the Cayman Islands. She wasn't very talkative. When we arrived at the airport, several photographers were eager to snap her picture. She appeared irritated with them, but still managed to smile pleasantly. I couldn't understand why there was so much interest. It was my first experience in first class, and it felt like it ended too quickly. A bright yellow mini SUV was waiting for us at the terminal. My hostess didn't hesitate to hike her skirt up to her thighs as she climbed into the driver's seat. To my embarrassment, she caught me stealing a glance at her tanned legs, which seemed to amuse her at my discomfort. 20 minutes later, we parked in the lower level of a mid-sized condominium building. Letitia Rothberg owned the entire property, reserving the top floor as her private suite. "Can I get you anything, Mr. Simmons?" "A beer would be great." The sight of her leaving the room was just as captivating as her leg flash at the terminal. Although it wasn't typical for me to stare at young women, Letitia Rothberg was different. We stepped out onto a small balcony that overlooked the ocean. It was lovely, but the wind was a bit much for my liking. I assumed she was trying to impress me with the beauty of the setting. It was indeed stunning, but my focus was more on the new bank account I was about to open. "You don't say much, Mr. Simmons. Surely there are a few questions you'd like answered." I found it strange that a woman of her stature would be drinking beer from a bottle. I could easily imagine her sipping champagne or a martini, but not beer. If she kept this up, she wouldn't maintain that figure for long. I usually prefer to take my time with things, but I suppose you can explain why we needed to come here to set up a bank account. It's a simple, safe, and secure way for you to receive funds. I think it will work out well for you. But it's just 1 coin. "Yes, but you have 7 more. I apologize, but it still seems a bit excessive." To my delight, we returned inside, to shelter from the wind. Can you accept this? I brought you here to have fun with me for a few days. I must admit, her unexpected remark made me smile. I thought it was nonsense, but I still found it funny. She had a great sense of humor. She was attractive and rich. What more could a man want? If I were 10 years younger. It's not good to tease an old man. We both had a little laugh about this situation. Come on, Mr. Simmons, let's buy fresh lobsters for dinner. We finished our beer and headed for the door. The restaurant and the meal were exceptional. I wasn't particularly fond of the wine my hostess chose, but I tried to be polite about it. Unfortunately, that didn't quite work out. Is there something wrong with the wine, Mr. Simmons? Was it that obvious? I apologize, it was just a reflex. When I was 18, I got completely wasted on cheap white wine and felt more miserable than ever. Now, every time I smell or taste white wine, I feel nauseous. I can't really explain why. This is good wine, but don't worry about it. A few minutes later, we had 2 cold beers. Curiously, there wasn't much conversation during the meal. We each ended with a fruit sorbet and a coffee. Tell me about yourself. Are you married? Do you have kids? What do you do for work? We have, the whole night, and I'm eager to know what brought us together. That's quite a few questions. I have 2 daughters, both studying at Columbia for degrees in international banking or something like that. I'm not exactly sure. I just pay the tuition. That's interesting. I have a master's degree from Columbia, and I'm one of their guest lecturers. I'd love to meet both of them. Did you see them this morning? We had lunch together. They really dislike it when I make them skip classes. You must have gotten married young to have 2 daughters in college. That sounds like a line a guy would use. I felt at ease with this Mediterranean beauty and could have chatted with her all night. I'm currently estranged from my wife. It's a strange term. I never thought I'd have to use it. She left me for a wealthy businessman. I believe he develops shopping malls or commercial properties. In any case, he drives a fancy car and lives in a large apartment. She told me she decided to trade up. The divorce will be finalized in about 4 weeks. That's a foolish reason to leave a good marriage. I assume everything was fine until she met this guy. I suppose so. She was never really satisfied with my job. I had several chances for advancement, but she refused to relocate. I wasn't happy about it, but I thought it was necessary to keep the marriage intact. Now I feel like a fool. And what is it that you do? I hesitated awkwardly. How do you explain to a beautiful, wealthy, successful woman that you're a produce manager at a supermarket? She noticed my discomfort and responded accordingly. It's not a big deal, we can discuss it later. No, it's fine. I'm not embarrassed by my job. It's just that being a supermarket produce manager isn't the kind of position that impresses women. My daughters don't mind, but my wife would often neglect to mention it to others. I could tell it bothered her. Do you enjoy what you do? Yes, and I excel at it. The server came by with more coffee and cleared the table. Mr. Simmons, I understand that we've only just met, but I believe first impressions matter. Briefly, what's your initial impression of me? The question put me in a tricky situation. If I answered truthfully, I might push her away. But if I tried to flatter her, I was sure she'd see right through it and think I was insincere. What should I do? To be brief, I see you as beautiful, intelligent, well-educated, and confident. She tilted her head slightly downward, looking up at me with a small grin. I was hoping for some honesty. I apologize, but we were having such a nice evening that I didn't want to spoil it. Is your real opinion of me really that negative? I don't want to upset you. Perhaps that's why your wife left you for someone else. If you hadn't always tried to please her, your marriage might have been stronger. That was a harsh thing to say, but I had to admit there was a grain of truth in it. Miss Rothberg, I think you're cunning and manipulative. You use your beauty and charm to get what you want. You're accustomed to getting your way, and it seems you might be a bit spoiled. You toy with men but are afraid of commitment. You clearly know how to make money as well as spend and invest it wisely. If you weren't so focused on proving you're as capable as any man, you might actually make a great mother. I felt guilty after saying that, but her comment about my marriage had really annoyed me. We sat in silence for a moment, just staring at each other. Do you really think I would be a good mother? Suddenly, the mood shifted dramatically. Everything felt pleasant again during the short ride back to the condo. I knew she had heard everything I said, but she seemed to take it without any argument. She asked for the truth, so I gave it to her, and her lack of anger made me feel better about being honest. My night with Letitia Rothberg was pretty quiet. It's not easy to get intimate when you're in different bedrooms. It was great because I wasn't expecting much anyway. The next morning I was the first to wake up and find a breakfast of fruit, Danish pastries, and hot coffee waiting for me, as well as the latest issue of the Wall Street Journal. The wind died down, and I took the opportunity to admire the view of the Caribbean Sea from the balcony. It was a pleasant change. About 20 minutes later, Letitia joined me and playfully grabbed a newspaper. We sat in comfortable silence, reading and sipping coffee, as if we had been doing this for ages. I had known her for less than a day, but everything seemed natural and easy. I'm afraid my phone doesn't work here, and I really need to call my daughters. Letitia handed me her cell phone. Come on. Cindy, it's Dad. Where are you? Everything is fine? According to your phone, you're in London. I'm in the Cayman Islands, and everything is fine. I just wanted to let you know that I didn't go straight home but stayed with a friend. I had to use her phone. Your photo was on TV last night. They showed you boarding a plane with Letitia Rothberg. What on earth are you doing with Letitia Rothberg? She's the friend I'm staying with. What's the big deal? Why are you with her? It's fine. There's nothing suspicious happening. I don't see why you're worried. Dad, that woman is a barracuda. She devours men for breakfast. Letitia came in from the balcony carrying the breakfast tray. As she walked by, I couldn't resist saying, "It's my daughter Cindy in New York. She warned me to be cautious because you're a barracuda." Cindy obviously heard me and let out a loud groan on the other end of the line. I could hear her and Sandy having a quick conversation. Why are you there? How do you know her? When are you coming home? Before I could respond to any of her questions, Letitia stood there with her hand out, waiting for me to give her the phone. Hi, Cindy. It's Letitia. Your father has told me about you and your sister. I'll be in New York tomorrow and would love to have lunch with both of you. Where can I pick you up? Naturally, I had no way of knowing what was happening on the other end of the line. Who is the professor? Pause. No problem, I'll collect you from the classroom at 11. All right, I'll say goodbye for you. Bye for now. Letitia returned the phone to me. Your daughter said goodbye. I'll be having lunch with them tomorrow. I promise to be nice, even if they think I'm a fish. She giggled a bit and, with a sway of her hips, headed to her room. An hour later, we found ourselves at the Cayman Federal Reserve Bank. With the guidance of my hostess, I opened my first offshore bank account, and 20 minutes later I saw $1.4 million wired to my new account from Towers and Burns. I thought it was a fair price for a 215-year-old penny. That afternoon, she arranged for a friend to take us out to feed the manta rays. During dinner, I asked her why she was working for a firm like Towers and Burns, and I discovered that she owned 60% of the company. What else can you share about yourself? It seems you're a significant figure in the global financial world, and I have to admit I don't know much about you. I grew up in London. My father is Israeli, and my mother is Turkish. I hold an MBA from Columbia. I'm not married, but I've been engaged twice. I haven't had a serious relationship in over 3 years. I've learned not to trust men who show interest in me. You could say I'm cynical. Most seem to want something from me and have nothing to give in return. That's unfortunate. I was hoping for a ride back to the condo. Does that mean you don't trust me? You need to take this seriously, you big jerk. I apologize if I seem insensitive. That wasn't my intention. I guess I'm just struggling to relate to your situation. I'll try to do better. All right, let's lighten things up. We have a party to attend. We concluded the evening at a cocktail party held in one of the larger hotels. Everyone recognized Letitia and treated her like a star. I spent the night trying to remain as inconspicuous as possible. I was still wearing the casual clothes I had on when I came to New York and hadn't expected to take a detour to the tropics. At first, Letitia felt it was her duty to accompany me, but I encouraged her to enjoy herself while I faded into the background, where I felt more at ease. She made an effort, but she kept checking in on me throughout the night. Somehow, I ended up talking with a couple of gentlemen from Argentina who were cattle ranchers. Our conversation began with soccer and then shifted to fishing. Thankfully, it was in English, presumably for my benefit. One of them commented on how stunning Letitia looked, unaware that I was her date for the evening. I felt a bit flattered. My contributions to the conversation mostly consisted of smiles and nods, as I didn't know enough about the topics to say anything meaningful until Ramon Duarte mentioned investments. He expressed interest in winter wheat and began explaining in detail why he planned to invest a significant amount of money in something he clearly knew little about. I got the impression he was quite wealthy, which left me puzzled about how he had achieved that. I usually take pride in my poker face, but this time it seemed to have failed me. Mr. Simmons, I can see from your expression that you don't agree with me about the winter wheat investment. I was caught off guard. I was meant to remain unnoticed and unheard, but my invisibility cloak had let me down. I'm sorry, Ramon. I'm afraid I'm not an investor, and I don't grasp the complexities of this whole situation. I used his first name because it felt strange to address him formally. That may be, but I sense you have some thoughts on the matter. I'm going to keep probing until you share them with us. I felt cornered. I managed a slight smile. I could use a fresh drink. For the next hour, the two gentlemen listened intently as the greengrocer from Alabama elaborated on how the outstanding winter wheat harvest in Alberta and Saskatchewan would compensate for the disappointing yields in the States. The Canadian Grain Board had secured all the available grain silos in North and South Dakota to store the surplus and was even booking railroad grain cars for temporary storage. Within a week, winter wheat futures would begin to decline and continue doing so until the market stabilized. Both Canada and the U.S. would have to export wheat overseas. I was running out of witty remarks when Letitia approached us. Ramon and his friend were pleased that she joined our little group and were genuinely taken aback when she took my arm and led me away. What was that all about, Gary? We were just chatting about food, groceries. She flashed me a small smile as we headed back to the condo. The following morning, we flew back to New York, where a group of photographers eagerly awaited her arrival. A courier from Towers and Burns delivered a small package containing the coins I had forgotten. After saying our goodbyes, Letitia and I parted ways, and I headed to the commuter terminal for my flight back to Huntsville. The divorce was still moving forward as planned, along with the sale of the house. Phil Williams from the head office left me several messages requesting that I call him. He was asking me once again to consider relocating to the corporate headquarters in New York, and this time I agreed. John Smurd also left a message. He wanted to meet for lunch. I cleaned out my locker at work and wished my replacements the best of luck. The newspaper featured a photo of Clayton and Marcy at a barbecue for a local politician, and they appeared to be the perfect couple. It took me an entire day to scan and identify all the coins I had collected in the bag from New York. With 3 weeks to go before I had to leave, I decided to list them on eBay as soon as I could. Everything should go smoothly as long as I didn't encounter any unreliable buyers. It took a full day to create the listings for the coins and prepare all the envelopes and blank shipping labels. All the proceeds would go into my PayPal account and then be transferred to my new offshore bank. Now, I had the weekend to unwind. My lunch with John Smurd on Friday was quite engaging. He was very pleased that I had outsmarted Clayton, but was disappointed that I hadn't benefited from the situation. It would have been too complicated to explain everything to him. Lunch went well, and before he left, he handed me the deed to 5 acres of land on the outskirts of town. He and his wife were heading to Florida, and he wanted to declutter before their departure. No good deed goes unrewarded. Not long after I said goodbye to John, my cell phone rang. Cindy and Sandy were set to arrive in Nashville in 2 hours. I had just enough time to drive there and pick them up. Flights to Nashville were half the cost of those to Huntsville, and the girls were on a budget. I had no trouble getting there or collecting them. Cindy couldn't wait to tell me about Letitia. More than 300 students gave lectures on corporate finance in the lecture hall. In the middle of the lecture, the professor stopped to introduce the students to Letitia. She just showed up like she was the owner of this place. She talked to the class for about 10 minutes and then announced that she needed 2 students for a hearty lunch at the Westin Hotel. We couldn't believe our ears when she called our names. "So you liked her?" "She's amazing, Dad. How the hell did you meet her?" "Well, she said she was looking for someone to have fun with her, and I was her first choice." Sandy slapped me on the shoulder. "It's not funny. Be serious, okay?" "What did you talk about at lunch?" She asked about our classes and school affairs. Sandy giggled a little. "She had a lot of questions about you. In fact, Cindy and I almost agree that she was interested in more than just friendships. I'm more than 10 years older than her and a couple of dollars poorer. I'm sorry, girls, but she's not my type at all." "Dad, she can get any man she wants. Why you? Think about it and give us a hint. As for us, you're perfect, but Letitia Rothberg doesn't know you the way we do. Obviously, your mother didn't know me either." There was silence for a few minutes. My comment about their mother went flying like shit in a punch bowl. It was not my intention to turn my daughters against their mother, and I regretted what I had said. I didn't put it quite right. Your mother is a wonderful woman, and I have no right to say that. Don't worry about it, Dad. We understand more than you think. The drive was peaceful for several miles until we crossed the Alabama state line, and Sandy's cell phone began to buzz. "Hello." Pause. "We got here about an hour ago. Everything's good." Pause. "You're joking." Pause. "That sounds fantastic. I'll let him know. Thanks for calling. Bye." In the rearview mirror, I saw Sandy giving Cindy a thumbs up. What was that about? Sandy leaned over the front seat. Guess what, Dad? Letitia is coming to Huntsville on Tuesday morning. She said you owe her a night's stay and that she expects breakfast in bed. I was flattered by the news, but I felt a bit overwhelmed by Letitia's expectations, as well as those of my daughters. Everything sounded fine, but I was unsure if I could handle it all in more ways than one. The weekend with the girls went really well. They spent Saturday afternoon with their mother, but unfortunately didn't get to see Clayton. I asked them not to mention Letitia. We went through everything they wanted to keep from the house, and by the time they left, we had it all sorted out. I prepaid for the storage unit until they finished school. On the drive back to Nashville, they made me promise to try to get along with Letitia. When I asked them to clarify, Cindy simply said, "Just don't upset her." That seemed straightforward enough. They were excited about my transfer to the city. I still couldn't understand why Letitia was interested in an old man who didn't even own an Armani suit. When I got home, it was time to unwind with a beer and the Sunday newspaper. There weren't any pictures of Marcy and Clayton this week, but there was a brief mention that the Keystone Development Company was having trouble securing financing for a local project. Additionally, winter wheat futures had seen a record drop in price, which was noteworthy. I called Terry Davis and invited him over. It wasn't lunchtime, but I thought we could catch up over a few beers. Clayton Manning definitely had a complicated past. For the past several years, he had either been broke or living extravagantly. He spent a lot of time moving to evade creditors and friends who had lent him money. His new project was starting to fail, with backers and investors disappearing. I don't think I had ever enjoyed beer so much. Monday morning exceeded my expectations. The coins I had up for auction were performing much better than I had anticipated. Cookson had estimated their value at around $300,000. While it seemed unlikely they would reach that amount, they were well on their way to surpassing $200,000. In just over 2 weeks, I would be a free man. 3 months ago, that thought would have felt overwhelming, but today I was looking forward to it. The buyers of the house had secured financing and were ready to close the deal. I found it amusing that Marcy felt so at ease with Clayton that she didn't require any of our joint assets. I wondered if she understood how uncertain her future truly was. I had a settlement meeting with the home buyers at 3 o'clock. The check for $200,000 went directly into my offshore account. They had no issue with me staying in the house for another week, which worked out well for both parties. The following morning, I received a phone call before I even had my coffee. An unknown caller formally informed me that Ms. Rothberg would be arriving on Delta Flight 724 at 10:45 a.m. I arrived 30 minutes early, feeling a bit anxious. Somehow, a couple of paparazzi had caught wind of her arrival and were waiting outside the terminal. I did my best to blend in. I parked in the short-term lot, not expecting such attention. Instead of waiting for me to pick her up, she chose to walk with me to the car. Naturally, the photographers noted my license plate, and the secret was out. I wasn't accustomed to all the fuss, but Letitia didn't seem bothered by it at all. She apologized for the commotion during the ride to my house. I couldn't help but think that I had wanted to kiss her when she got off the plane. What a silly old man I am. I felt embarrassed by the emptiness of my house. In recent months, I had cleared out as much as possible. What remained were just the essentials that the new owner had agreed to take care of once I was gone. My guest seemed amused by my attempts to apologize for the sparse surroundings. Since there was nothing to eat in the house, we made a quick trip to the local Taco Bell, which was her choice. I promised her ribs from dreamland for dinner. It was refreshing to be with a woman who had a hearty appetite. Letitia, I'm glad you're here, but I'm puzzled as to why. I thought you'd be getting back to business. This is business, silly. I know you're moving to New York next week and you need a place to stay. I have a spare bedroom available, and I'm here to help you pack. A truck will come tomorrow morning to take anything that doesn't fit in your car. No furniture, though. How did you find out I was moving? That's what I do. If I keep track of the little things, the big things tend to take care of themselves. Not that it makes sense, but I always wanted to say it. Are you in cahoots with my daughters? I tried to flash her an innocent grin, but it's tough for an old man to look coy. Her offer was unexpected, but I couldn't find any reason to turn it down. Of course. Now let's grab some boxes so we can start packing. I sensed she would be more at home in a boardroom or a bank, yet she seemed to be enjoying just being with me. Despite that, I still felt a bit uncomfortable about the age difference. We ended up discarding more items than we packed. She had strong opinions about my wardrobe and dismissed my pleas for mercy. Once I was settled in New York, she promised to take me shopping for some decent clothes. By the time we finished, there were more boxes than would fit in my car, but not enough to require a moving van. I hoped she had arranged for a small truck. I set aside my laptop and a small inkjet printer to deal with the items I planned to auction on eBay. Just as we were getting ready to head out for dinner, a new surprise arrived. An auto delivery van pulled up in front of the house. Letitia and I watched as the driver, dressed sharply, stepped down from the cab with a clipboard in hand. "Are you Gary Simmons?" he asked. "Yeah," I replied. "I have a delivery for you. Where should I take it?" "What the hell is it?" I inquired. "A car. It's from Mr. Ramon Duarte. Is there space in the garage?" The spot in the garage where Marcy's Volvo used to be was now empty. I pointed in that direction and nodded. I noticed Letitia covering her mouth and stifling a laugh. I wasn't sure, but I think she found my confusion amusing. 5 minutes later, I was staring at a shiny orange sports car parked next to my old Volvo. "What the hell is it?" I asked again. With great pride, the delivery guy replied, "That's a 2008 Lamborghini Gallardo Spider, Superleggera model. Isn't it the most beautiful thing you've ever seen?" Letitia was struggling to contain her laughter. She wasn't being loud, but she was clearly enjoying the moment. I signed the delivery form so the sharply dressed driver could head home. I had no idea what I was going to do with this unexpected gift, but I knew I wouldn't be taking it with me to New York. "Get in the Volvo, little Miss Funny Pants," I said. My guest was still smiling as we backed out of the driveway. I ordered a full rack of ribs and 2 Fosters. "Could you please explain what's going on with the car?" I asked. Ramon shorted on winter wheat. Everyone thought he was crazy. When the prices started to drop, he began doubling up on contracts. In less than a week, he made over $40 million. He was thrilled about the money, but even more excited about the praise he received for his smart move. Well, good for Ramon. I just hope he didn't mention my name. He wanted to give you credit, but only with your consent. He thanked me for bringing you to the party and asked for your address. I had no idea he was going to do this, though. The ribs were served, and I watched with great interest as Letitia covered several of them in Tabasco sauce before she began to eat. I truly loved this girl. "You do realize I'm going to send it back tomorrow, right?" "I suspected as much. Don't worry about it. Ramon won't be upset. He probably would have offered you money but figured you'd refuse. This way, you'll feel a bit more compelled to keep the cash." Thanks to the Tabasco, we ended up ordering a few more beers. I was having a great time and wasn't in a hurry to head home. At that moment, I would have given anything to spend the night in bed with this gorgeous young woman. I envied the charming, smooth talkers who could convince any girl to sleep with them in just 5 minutes. My best hope was a simple goodnight kiss. We couldn't linger all night, so eventually I had to drive back home. The next morning was truly delightful. All my worries were in vain. As soon as we entered the house, Letitia took my hand and led me into the bedroom. Being a true gentleman, I have made every effort to meet her needs in the first place. For breakfast in bed, we ordered juice, coffee, and Danish pastries. I'm sorry, but considering the circumstances, this is the best I can offer. It's better than I could have hoped. Eating from a tray in bed turned out to be quite uncomfortable. After laughing a little and correcting the menu, we went to the kitchen. The idea of breakfast in bed seems more appealing than it actually is. Letitia, I don't want to spoil your mood, but I sincerely wonder why you chose me. I have nothing to offer you, and you deserve so much more. I've been bullied too often by charming, courteous playboys. I refuse to fall into this trap again. Oh, I understand. You find me attractive because I'm not charming or courteous. My guest found it amusing and gave a small laugh. Gary, I was quite impressed with the deal you made in New York with James's. I was just selling some coins. Not at all. I found the proposal you made to buy the trust fund land rather intriguing. You think of me as a philanthropist? Not in the slightest. I see you as a clever bastard who capitalized on a unique situation to get back at your wife's lover. This brought a big smile to my face. I was impressed by her sharpness and how well she hit it. Was that wrong? No, Gary. It was brilliant. I was impressed and wanted to learn more about you at that moment. You couldn't possibly have known what I was up to in New York. I knew what you did. I just didn't find out the reason until several days later. You were checking me out? Of course I'm not foolish. I have to admit the boost to my ego was refreshing. Unfortunately, Letitia had an early flight back to New York. I hated to see her leave. She departed with a happy heart and a key to her apartment. The Lamborghini dealer couldn't come to pick up the car until the following day. That was fine with me since I had no plans to drive it anyway. The movers arrived with a small truck to collect my belongings for the move to New York. Terry Davis called to inform me that Keystone Development was facing serious financial troubles. It appeared that Clayton had mysteriously lost nearly all his investors overnight. There were rumors that some people were calling in their markers, which Clayton still owed. That evening my almost ex-wife paid me a visit. What do I owe this surprise? I couldn't help but be a bit sarcastic. I need to discuss a few things with you. I'm leaving in a few days, but I'll help however I can. I wanted to borrow my old Volvo, but I noticed it's gone. What's that orange car in the garage? Things were getting interesting. I'm sorry, Marcy. When you said you didn't want your old Volvo, I sold it back to the dealer. He might still have it if you want to check. Shit. I had never heard Marcy use that word before. The orange car was a gift, but I'm returning it tomorrow. I can't see myself driving something like that. The sticker on the window said $225,000. Who would give you a gift like that? Your new girlfriend? Number. It was a cattle rancher from Argentina I helped a few weeks ago. It was just his way of showing appreciation. So, what else can I assist you with? There was a pause in the conversation. I could tell Marcy had more to say, but wasn't sure how to bring it up. Would you like something to drink? I have beer and some diet soda. No, I can't stay long. How did you get here anyway? I don't see a car. I took a cab. Gary, you said you're leaving in a few days. Would it be okay if I stayed in the house for a while? The house is sold. We closed yesterday, and the new owners will be moving in this weekend. They're letting me stay until Friday, but that's it. What's wrong with the condo by the river? She didn't answer that question. After a brief silence, she asked, "What happened to the money you got from the house?" Things were getting really intriguing now, and I was starting to enjoy the direction of the conversation. "It's gone. You clearly stated you didn't want any of it. What little money there was went towards setting up a new apartment for my move." "Where are you moving?" "New York. I got promoted with a significant salary increase. I need to be there by Monday." I had no intention of telling Marcy that I would be living with Letitia, nor did I plan to mention the bank account in the Caymans. "You never told me what happened to the condo." "It was only leased. The lease expired and the owner didn't want to renew it." "Where are you living now?" "We're at the Holiday Inn until Clayton can arrange a new place." "Oh, I see." Now I understood why she wanted to move back into our old house. Marcy appeared somewhat confused. She wanted to ask for assistance but was unsure how to approach it. I could sense she was in distress. Another pause fell over the conversation. "Is there anything else I can do for you? Could you give me a ride back to the Holiday Inn?" The first part of the drive was silent. "I hear you have a girlfriend. Tell me about her." "She's not really a girlfriend. She's more of a business associate." "What kind of business?" "You're not involved in any business." "You're right. I'm just a produce clerk at a grocery store. I can't hide that from you, can I?" Marcy remained quiet, staring out the window, and I heard her mutter under her breath, "Bastard." This was the moment I could have unleashed all my frustrations. It was a prime opportunity to express how much the newspaper photos had affected me. Instead, I simply smiled to myself. She was in a tough spot, and I felt a sense of redemption. I felt guilty about it for a moment, but that feeling quickly faded. I dropped her off at the motel entrance. She walked away without looking back or saying goodbye. I hated to admit it, but I felt a small sense of satisfaction. It was shaping up to be a good week. On Thursday morning, I unexpectedly received my final divorce papers. They arrived earlier than expected, but who was I to complain? The front page of the Huntsville newspaper featured a photo of Letitia Rothberg arriving at the airport, with me holding her arm. A copy of the paper is delivered free to each room at the Holiday Inn, so Marcy could read it with her breakfast. I was sure Clayton would explain who Letitia was to her. I emptied my safety deposit box at the bank. My 7 pennies would be useful in the near future. I thought Letitia might inquire about them while she was here, but she never mentioned it. All our discussions remained purely social. If she had any interest in me for business reasons, she never made it clear. I set buy-it-now prices for all the coins I had listed in the auction, and over half of them sold at that price. I spent the remainder of the day packaging the sold coins and preparing them for the post office. The rest of the auctions were scheduled to close before noon on Friday. If all the PayPal payments went through, I planned to send them out that afternoon. Any delays would have to wait until Monday. Early Saturday morning, I hit the road. Most of the funds in my PayPal account had been transferred to my Cayman account, but I kept a small balance in PayPal in case I came across something I couldn't resist. As I was leaving, the new owners of the house were arriving, which worked out well for both parties. The drive up north was expected to take about 12 hours without any delays. Letitia was at the apartment and had promised to prepare a home-cooked meal for my arrival. I couldn't help but wonder who would be doing the cooking. It was reassuring to realize that I still had what it took to capture the heart of such a beautiful woman. I felt confident that I could meet any of her expectations. I had just crossed into Virginia on Interstate 81 when I received a call from Cindy. It turned out that Clayton Manning had left town, leaving Marcy without a car, a place to stay, money, or a way to cover her motel bill. I asked Cindy for her advice on what to do. She chuckled and replied, "Just smile."